carving before the project just to kind of get to learn more about carving, learn more about the process, and then ever since the process has just kind of lit something in me that it's what I find the most joy in doing. It's what I enjoy. It feels like a lifelong goal to want to carve these poles and continue to have those stories told. You know, my great-great-great-grandfather was a carver, and then his son was a carver. My dad was a carver and a woodworker, same with my grandpa, and so I kind of grew up around it, but the carving side was something that was new in the past few years. I think I've been to about 10 totem raisings in my lifetime. The first one I went to was probably about your age, when I was in high school. Over in Kayaashkeiditaan, and just had an incredible time and fell in love with totems, and I knew that I had ancestors that were carvers, and so I think that was one of the things that really ignited my love for carving. So I worked as an apprentice on 4 of the poles, and then halfway through that process I went to WCA and suggested that we had another log that was only about 9 feet long, and suggested that we do another pole based on a grave marker for Aak'wtaatseen, who had passed away or was killed during the Wrangell bombardment. And so I carved that one, and that was my first project as the lead carver. So we raised 5 totem poles this last summer, and it's part of a bigger project to do well, as many of the poles in Wrangell as we can. There were traditionally about 40 here in Wrangell. And part of the project idea was that it wasn't just going to be carving the poles, but raising up new carvers, so apprentice carvers that could someday take over and learn how to carve and know how to carve and continue the project long term. So I've worked on 7 poles now. 5 as an apprentice and 2 as a lead carver. You know, on any given pole you probably have anywhere between 3 and 6 people working on it. I know most of the poles took probably in the range of like 80 to 90 days. There were nights I was down here till 3 or 4 in the morning when I was carving the killer whale, the grave marker. I mean, it was a full-time job. Sometimes you just kind of get into a zone with carving and you really want to ride those moments when it's making sense to just go with it. And I think there's a connection with education in there as well, where wanting to pass on those stories and the art form itself and the history behind the poles down to the next generation. So I spend most of my evenings carving still, even if there's not a totem project going. I guess there's an element of patience, of letting it happen, being patient enough with the wood and the process and not trying to rush anything. That could be challenging. It could be challenging sometimes. TJ was very meticulous in how he measured things, and Joe was a little bit more fluid. And he would definitely measure things as well, but he was, I don't know how to describe it other than a little bit more ethereal or cerebral with it. And you know, we definitely found rhythms of working with each other, and they would ask us to do certain things based off of if they felt that we could do different parts of the pole. Yeah, the wood I think definitely talks to you, and we talk to the wood as well. You know, for me, one of my favorite parts in any of the poles, in any of the figures, is when the eyes start to come out, because for some reason I guess I connect the eyes with part of the soul of that figure or that pole. And so when that starts to come out, it really feels like the pole is coming to life and that the log's coming to life. I think there's definitely a part where we want to respect the wood as well, and respect that, you know, we chop down a tree for these poles to stand up. And so when we carve, I try to make sure I'm in a good headspace to do it and not angry or upset. When you're angry or upset, you start carving a little more erratically and a little bit more too fast. You know, you're making mistakes that way. And you know, I still remember what they looked like when they were just logs, and starting to see them come to life, going back to the old photos and the old stories about the poles and being able to see those things kind of come out. So I think those are the things that really stood out for me. And then when they finally stood up, and hearing people cheer and celebrate and having it be a community event, everybody involved, everybody wanting to participate, to me that was beyond words. You know, the whole process felt like a community project, really. You know, when we were carving, we'd have people from throughout the community stop in, bring food or coffee, just talk about the poles. And so it felt like something that belonged to everybody, really. One thing I loved about it was working with other people that love carving and just obsess over it. You know, even when we were outside of the carving shed, we would end up talking about carving all of the time anyway. And so it was hard to raise the totems. One of them in particular, the Kayaashkeiditaan one that's at Totem Park. It was about 2 tons, and we raised it traditional style with the ropes. And so it was one of the heaviest poles that TJ's ever done, is what he said. Certainly the heaviest that we raised that week. And then getting everybody to pull and having those lines and having a plan, making sure everybody is safe. There's just a lot going on, and so, you know, we talked through the process a few different times to make sure that we knew what was happening. We had people in charge on each of the ropes, so it felt like we had a solid plan, but it was definitely challenging to get it up. And then I think once it was finally standing, for me, there's a moment where there was a group of us at the bottom of the Kayaashkeiditaan pole just pushing with everything we had, and I couldn't even see like daylight. You know, it was so crowded in there, and we were just pushing with everything we had. And then once it finally stood up, that feeling of euphoria and joy, to me, that's what really stands out. And so when I think about them going up, I think that's probably my favorite moment. When the ceremony was done, I think what I felt the most, maybe a sense of just love for what we were doing and why we were doing it. So there was a little bit of sadness that these things that we had worked on for, you know, over a year were done, and there's a finality to that process, but there's also an immense amount of joy and pride in seeing that process be done. Having the first pole raising in 38 years, those are things that I'll remember for the rest of my life, and so that ceremony holds a special place in my heart, I guess. In some ways, when the killer whale pole went up, that was one of my favorite moments, because it's in the same lawn at the post office where my great-great-grandfather has a pole standing, and that one's a replica of one that his father had done. And so being able to see that and know that people around town, whenever they go to the post office, they see that, for me, that just, it feels like something is right within my soul. And I guess that's something that I keep on wanting to feel and chase in my life. Once the poles were done, there was a sense of wanting to look at what was next. I think the thing I'm most proud of is just being able to see totems stand in Wrangell again, and knowing that these stories are going to continue on. You know, some of these poles that we had carved are the new iteration of poles that had stood back in the 1830s and 40s. And so seeing that process continue forward and knowing that that's going to go forward for the next generation, I think is what really stands out to me as something I'm proud of. My favorite pole is the Kayaashkeiditaan pole. My great-great-great-grandfather carved that one for his wife and his children, didn't charge anything for it. And so we have the original that he carved in the room next to us. And so that's probably my favorite pole of all time, both as an artist, but also the histories and the stories behind it. The replicated version that's at Totem Park is very excellent. They did a great job doing that one as well. And so that's probably my favorite pole.